Good afternoon and welcome to the second annual Web-Based Academic Vision for Excellence seminars, also known as WAVES, which is hosted by the Wyoming Department of Education, Special Education Programs Division. We are really appreciative of your time and effort to learn from local and national presenters on important topics that impact educators, students, and families across our state. I am Donna Smith with the Wyoming Department of Education, and I'm going to be your host today. We encourage you to participate and ask questions throughout the presentation by posting your questions in the chat box along the way, and your questions will be answered following the presentations from our presenters. Presentation recordings and materials will be available for you at the Wyoming Instructional Network for the remainder of this school year. The recording of this session will be available at that site until June 30th, 2022. So watch for a link to be provided in the chat box during this session a little later. Also, I want to please make a note that there's been a change in obtaining PTSB and/or STARS credit. There's going to be a WAVES Summer Fall PTSB form emailed to all registered participants, which will list all sessions from August through November for this year. Participants will be responsible to track your own hours of attendance for the WAVES conference for that summer fall semester. And at that time, then you will only submit one form, one summer fall PTSB form after the final session on November 9th. The submission deadline is December 15th, 2021 for all summer fall WAVES sessions, and no forms will be accepted after that time on December 15th. PTSB credit will be submitted by WDE once the attendance has been verified for all of your sessions. There will be a separate PTSB submission form for the winter-spring WAVE sessions, which will begin in January and will end in May 2022. And if you are seeking STARS credit only, please contact Jennifer Duncan at wyo.gov. At the end of this session, please fill out an evaluation for this particular session. Your feedback is actually really valuable, and it helps to drive the planning of future webinars or events. The link will be posted in the chat box, so make sure you watch for it. All links will also be included in a follow-up email that you should receive within 24 hours of this session. When you submit your evaluation, you're going to be entered into a drawing to win a prize for your school or classroom. Today's prize, I'm really happy to announce, is actually going to be a seat at the 36th Annual Executive Function Conference for Executive Function, Attention, and Stress Building Resiliency, and Fostering Equity for All Students. This is going to be a virtual conference held November 11th and 12th, 2021. This conference is actually going to be put on by Dr. Meltzer and her group at Research ILD. So again, the prize will be a seat at this conference. Make sure that you do get your evaluations in though, because that will be your ticket for the drawing. Now, please take a moment, if you didn't, again, like I said, rename yourself so that we can verify attendance. Today's session is the second of 4 sessions regarding executive function. The remaining sessions will be held October 14th and 21st. If you haven't already, make sure to register for each session, as each session takes a different focus surrounding executive functioning skills and strategies, such as stress reduction and flexible thinking, motivation and engagement, and fostering flexible mindsets in early learners. And again, the final session will be specific to early childhood, but again, it's really for all to enjoy. So make sure that you get registered for those sessions. We are really blessed to have both Dr. Lynn Meltzer and Donna Kincaid to share their wealth of knowledge and expertise with us today. First, I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Lynn Meltzer. Dr. Meltzer is the director of the Institutes for Learning and Development, also known as Research ILD and ILD, in Lexington, Massachusetts. She is a fellow and past president of the International Academy for Research in Learning Disabilities. She is the founder and program chair of this annual Learning Differences Conference, which she has chaired for the past 35 years. For 30 years, she was an associate in education at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and an adjunct associate professor in the Department of Child Development at Tufts University. Her 40 years of clinical work, research, publications, and presentations have focused on understanding the complexity of learning and attention problems. Her extensive publications include articles, chapters, and books. Most recently, Executive Function in Education, From Theory to Practice from 2018, Promoting Executive Function in the Classroom, 2010, and The Power of Peers in the Classroom, Enhancing Learning and Social Skills, 2015, which was co-edited with Karen Harris. Together with her research ILD staff, she has developed SMARTS, an evidence-based executive function and peer mentoring coaching curriculum for middle schools and high schools. She has been an invited speaker at numerous national and international conferences, including the International Association for Cognitive Education Conference in South Africa. She has been honored with a number of awards, including the Council for Learning Disabilities Outstanding Research Award in October 2015, and the Innovative Program of the Year Award from CHADD, or Children with Attention Deficit Disorders. If you will allow me, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you also to Donna Kincaid. Donna, if you don't mind popping on, and that way when you two begin your presentation, you can just continue seamlessly. So Ms. Donna Kincaid is the Assistant Director of the Institutes for Learning and Development and the Director of Outreach and Training. She coordinates and facilitates professional development for private and public schools and consults with parents and teachers. She is also an experienced educational specialist who conducts psychoeducational assessments and provides individual educational therapy to high school and college students, as well as adults. During her career, she has worked with all levels of educators from paraprofessionals to superintendents, and was formerly the Director of Special Education at a bilingual charter school. Donna earned her bachelor's degree in special needs at Boston College and a master's degree in curriculum and instruction from the University of Massachusetts Lowell, with supervisor director certification in the area of special needs. She is a contributing author to a research ILD book entitled Promoting Executive Function in the Classroom, which was our last week drawing prize. So hopefully you will be the winner of that prize, and you'll be contacted. You should be receiving an email soon if you attended and send in your evaluation. So today you're going to learn about important executive function strategies you can use in your classrooms. Again, please watch for the chat for important resources and information throughout this session. Now it is my distinct honor and pleasure to turn the time over to Dr. Lynn Meltzer.
Well, thank you, Dina, and thank you to all of you for being here. I know it's towards the end of a school week, but it's always feels fatiguing on a Thursday afternoon. So we appreciate your being here. And as you heard, our focus will be cognitive flexibility and ways in which you can promote that flexible thinking in your classroom. If any of you are interested in the work at Research ILD and ILD, I'm just showing you the two websites. As you heard, as you heard last week, for those of you who attended, we focus on research and development and teacher training and conferences for teachers that address the issues of helping students to use strategies that empower them to learn how to learn. And that's what our work has been devoted to for the past 30 years at both Research ILD and in our Clinical Institute ILD. This is part of our SMARTS website. As I mentioned last week, our work over the past 10 years or so has culminated in the development of the SMARTS curriculum, and a very structured, strategic, explicit curriculum for teaching students executive function strategies. So today I'm going to start by just introducing Caitlin. There's an error here on the slide, and I apologize. I just sort of noticed it, Caitlin. And you met Donna, who's going to be teaming with me on our presentation together. The title of our session is Executive Function and Stress Reduction, Flexible Thinking Strategies for Getting Unstuck. And Caitlin Vanderberg, who's here, who you see here, will be teaming with us. The name on there is wrong. I apologize. There was an error on the slide. And Caitlin will be managing the chat and sort of number of the surveys that we will be presenting to you. So we're going to begin with a survey that Caitlin, I'm going to hand over to Caitlin I'm going to ask you to answer these questions in the survey, and then we'll show you some of the statistics in terms of how flexible you all are. And these are the kinds of questions you're going to get about transitioning to different work situations. And so I'm going to hand over to Caitlin for a minute.
Great, thank you so much. So I will start sharing my screen as we wait for responses to come in. Okay. Can you see this? Okay, can you see the responses? Great, I think so. All right, so we have about 3 responses so far, so feel free to take another second to complete these questions. But as it stands right now, for question 1, easily transitioning to a different work situation, about 71.4% said yes, that was something that they were able to do easily and flexibly during COVID. Adjusting to remote teaching, we have the same split for question 1 and 2. Oh, it's changing now. So about 67% of respondents said yes, they were able to easily adjust. And now it's about a 60-40 split. Adjusting to the challenges of working from home. Really close, over 90% said yes, they were able to easily adjust to that change. And then embracing new ways of teaching different groups of students. So here we have about 40%, or even more, about 44% said that no, that was more of a challenging feat in the past year. So very interesting responses here. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to respond to the survey.
Yes, thank you. So what we're trying to get at, let me take over the screen share. So what we're trying to get at from the survey, if you look at, these are the questions you just answered, were sort of different aspects of cognitive flexibility. And all of us have been sorely taxed over this past year with COVID and with having to go back and forth from remote to in-class learning to a hybrid situation and not knowing from day to day what the situation is going to be. And it's continuing for all of you through this year. And as you've noted, it adds a lot of stress as well, because you're being asked to be constantly flexible and sometimes it impacts planning. You've got to plan multiple ways of dealing with a situation. So flexibility is core to everything we do, and even more so now, and I think everyone's becoming more aware of it. So the issues that we're going to address, and I'm going to address in my part of the presentation today, is what is cognitive flexibility and why is this a key executive function process? And how do we teach strategies that promote flexible thinking and problem solving, beginning in the earliest grades? And I know a number of you are interested in early childhood education. The issues are the same, that from preschool, it's really important to address these issues. What strategies help students to think and problem solve flexibly as they complete their schoolwork? And then the 4th question, how can cognitive flexibility and EF strategies help to reduce students' anxiety and stress? Last week, I talked in detail about what is executive function and what is metacognitive awareness and how do we promote those. So I'm not going to repeat that, but for those of you who did attend last week, I hope you remember this clogged funnel model. And the point that I made is that this is our paradigm, that when information is coming into students at a rapid pace when they're sitting in a classroom, and to us as adults too, and we all need to be using those executive function strategies quickly and very efficiently. So if we set goals, we organize and prioritize, we shift flexibly, we access working memory, and we self-monitor and check. And it's the ability to sift and sort and prioritize which helps that information to go through the funnel quickly and not to get stuck. So cognitive flexibility, as I see it, is the most important of these executive function processes, and it underlies everything. And as I discussed last week, it's these processes are Rubik's Cube. They all interact. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. My mouse just, oh my gosh, sorry, my mouse just played up. So I'm having trouble with my mouse. And for some reason, hopefully that won't happen again. So I have my ability to be flexible and yours during this presentation might be a little taxed because of my computer. So the executive function strategies interact with attention, with motivation and effort, and with emotional regulation. And the issue about anxiety, if kids are not cognitively flexible, if they can't shift easily, their anxiety increases, their effort decreases, and they can become pretty stuck. That funnel, it gets clogged and kids get stuck, and that leads to emotional disruptions, frustration, anxiety, anger often. So I wanted to sort of show you a few sampling of very famous people who, and this slide's called famous failures, but people who were incredibly flexible, learned from their failures, and therefore then became incredibly successful. Beginning with Albert Einstein, who actually didn't even graduate from high school. He left high school at 16 years old, and his father threw up his hands and said, "What am I going to do with you? You'll never get a job." And because he was so flexible, and because he was obviously a brilliant as well, he was able to be sort of, a leading scientist of all times. Walt Disney, who was fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination. Oprah Winfrey, who was demoted from her job as a news anchor because she couldn't make it. She wasn't made for television. Michael Jordan, who basically wasn't put on the basketball team in high school because they said that he wasn't good enough. Steve Jobs, who was thrown out of his first when he first launched the Apple company, and had to really dig deep and be very flexible in order to come back and obviously create a thriving organization. And the Beatles as well, who were told they couldn't sing. So these are all cases of like famous people who were incredibly flexible, who learned from their failures and became highly successful. So a piece of this is cognitive flexibility, positive mindsets, and basically strong executive function strategies. So what is cognitive flexibility? It's the ability to shift and think flexibly. And I'm going to give you another questionnaire and ask Caitlin to get you to fill in these answers in the chat so that we can show you your profile as a group.
Okay, so just put the survey in the chat. So please go ahead and open that up and you can start filling it out. So there are 4 questions. The first question is, I tried to connect it to something I already know. Here, let me share my screen. Okay. And the second question is, I try to think of something that was helpful that I've done before. Question 3, I tried to come up with effective ways of approaching the new task. And the last one, I think about how long a task will take and set aside chunks of time to complete it. So we have about 12 responses so far. Ooh, so about half of everyone who responded said they usually connect something new to something they already know. And for question 2, also about half of all respondents said they try to think of something that was helpful that they've done before. And about 35% always do that. And here for question 3, coming up with effective ways of approaching the new task, we have 44% who say always, and similarly 44% who say usually, and then about 11% who say sometimes. And then the last question, thinking about how long a task will take and setting aside chunks of time to complete it, 34.5% said usually, 20% said always, 20% said rarely, 24% said sometimes. So that was more of a split than the other questions.
Well, that was really interesting. You can see that there's a difference between the items, and that's the issue with cognitive flexibility. It depends what the particular task is that requires flexibility. Sometimes one's flexible and sometimes one's not. So should I take over? Can I take over, Caitlin?
Sure.
Okay. So that last question, I think about how long a task will take and set aside chunks of time to complete it. That aspect of flexibility involves a lot of planning and goal setting. So it's a mix of strategies. And that's the area where there was sort of a pretty equal distribution of your responses. So think about yourselves in terms of each of ththese aspects of cognitive flexibility. So to give you an example, to explain exactly what we mean by it, I want you to take a look at this. And I'm hoping that all of you can see two ways. This is perceptual flexibility. So two different ways of viewing this. One way says you, and now if you shift your the image, it also says me. So if you look at the brown, the outside, inside, you're going to see you. And if you look at the brown as the sort of lettering, you see me. Similarly, with the Escher cube, if you look at this from one perspective, you can see the cube in one set of faces of the cube. And if you shift your vision slightly, shift your head slightly, you'll see it differently. I wish I was there in person with you, because then we could all discuss it, but I hope that you can all see that. And the paradigm that I use to explain cognitive flexibility is this one, that if you're standing at the top of the mountain, what do you see? You see the big picture. You see the overall sort of view. You don't see any of the details. It's pretty fuzzy. You're seeing sort of the overview or the gestalt. If you're at the bottom of the mountain, what are you seeing? If I hone in, that's really what you're seeing. You're seeing the leaves. You're not even seeing the trees. And so cognitive flexibility is the ability to shift between back and forth from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain and back again. And it's if you think about it in relation to things you do on a daily basis or the academic work your students are being required to do, it's shifting back and forth between the big ideas and the major themes and the relevant details. And it's being able to ignore irrelevant information because relevant details need to be sorted apart from irrelevant details. That's a key part of reading comprehension, of written language, of studying for tests, of taking tests. So cognitive flexibility, as I said, is key. And as part of your approach to teaching kids to be flexible, you can ask them what, you teach them what it is about it. And then we ask our students to explain to us what it means. And these kids in second grade said to see different points of view or to get different strategies for people. Like, don't just look at your own way, because there are different ways it could be true. So from a very early age, getting kids to explain what it means and then to be able to self-reflect. We talked about self-reflection and metacognition and metacognitive awareness last week. So what classroom tasks require students to shift approaches flexibly? Donna and I brainstormed this list. And basically, this is just a few, these are just a few of the classroom assignments that require flexibility. Switching from classroom instruction to online instruction, which you've required your students to do a lot over the past year. Shifting between different technologies during remote learning. Switching applications on the computer within and between classes. Managing with open-ended projects and assignments. It's a huge issue for kids. Finding information quickly when they have research projects. Handling information overload to prevent a clogged funnel. Following unclear or vague directions. Some teachers give too much information, some teachers give too little. And that requires a lot of cognitive flexibility. And for middle and high school students, they're shifting between different teaching styles constantly and having to figure out what you as their teachers are looking for, and then organizing and prioritizing open-ended tasks. So all of these require an incredible amount of cognitive flexibility. So how do we teach strategies that promote flexible thinking and problem solving, beginning in the earliest grades? And I'm focusing on school age here, but keep in mind that many of these strategies can be adjusted and adapted for preschool, as you'll see. So in the school age years, you want to use metacognitive prompts for teaching all strategies. Like, what is the strategy? When is the strategy most helpful? And how should the strategy be used? And getting students to reflect on this, to be metacognitive, and to recognize that every strategy doesn't apply to every task all of the time. So for example, this cartoon, they only taught me how to think outside the box. I'm not trained for circles. So, I can only think in squares. So the issue of cognitive flexibility, I was taught one way, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to use it one way. We're trying to teach our students to think in many ways and to be flexible and to be aware of that. So some of the things you can do, which are very, very easy and add fun to the classroom, particularly appropriate in the early grades and also definitely be used in preschool, are to use 5 minutes warm-ups to promote flexible thinking and metacognitive awareness with jokes, riddles, puns, ambiguous language. I'm going to get Caitlin to show you a very brief YouTube video of an elementary school student with jokes and riddles. Thank you, Caitlin.
No problem. And let me know if you can't hear it. So let me go ahead.
Hi, I'm Shat Sparkle, and today I'm going to do the best jokes 2019. Let's get started. What's the strongest animal? A snail, because it carries its home on its back. What do you call a bear with no teeth? A gummy bear. Where do cows go for entertainment? The movies. Why are ghosts bad liars? Because you can see right through them.
It's about a minute or so.
Thank you. Let me take the screen again. So you can see, that's just an example of how, how riddles and jokes can be used, and you can be very creative, and it adds fun to the classroom and to your school day. And students, high school and middle school students, love sharing jokes. It just adds humor. So think about ways you can implement. It's a great way of starting the school week, or maybe ending the school week when kids have had a long week and are tired and stressed, because it adds to it. It can help to de-stress. So from the earliest grades as well, we teach Amelia Bedelia in the preschool years, and kids are reading those stories all the time. Amelia Bedelia dressed the chicken, and of course she tries to dress it physically. The literal versus the figurative use of words. But typically by the end of kindergarten, we take the Amelia Bedelia books away and we say, okay, well, that's now we've got to be serious about our instruction. And the reality is the messages of Amelia Bedelia and the focus on cognitive flexibility is something we need to continue teaching. And so at the, slightly older grades, in the elementary school grades, you can using activities, and you can go online for a ton of these. Have you ever seen a vegetable stand? Asking kids to illustrate two different ways of interpreting this. So a vegetable stand, either exactly a traditional vegetable stand versus a vegetable like an onion standing on 2 feet. So it's the literal versus the sort of real meaning. Or have you ever seen a home run? So of course we all in baseball, but it's really a home running on feet. So kids can have fun. You can have fun. You can do it all sorts of ways. In our SMARTS curriculum, we have a whole list of these and sort of a structured format for kids to share, to breaking kids into pairs or into small groups and having them share and interpret some of these multi-meaning words or phrases and having fun together. Or kids make nutritious snacks. So it could be kids who are baking or basically kids being eaten. So there can be humor involved in these multi-meaning either single words, or sentences or paragraphs, and you can build these sort of towards a higher level of sophistication as you choose. So as I said, in SMARTS, we do have a long list of both sentences as well as single words, like 2 meanings for hot dog, 2 meanings for crop, 2 meanings for produce. So many of these words have different meanings based on whether they're used as nouns, verbs, or adjectives, as you'll see here. So note, shift the meaning of the word, and the student wrote a note is either a musical note, to notice something or write something, and a notebook, or scale refers to a scale that tells the time, to scale across something, or a scaly crocodile. So the use of the multi-meaning words can also be used to teach basic grammatical content. So we need to focus on teaching students to think and shift flexibly so that they set and adjust their short-term goals, they set and adjust their long-term goals, they create and self-monitor their daily schedules, they manage their schoolwork, especially while remote learning is ongoing. And all of these tests, as we said earlier, involve cognitive flexibility, but students need to learn these strategies explicitly, because often they don't think flexibly, they don't shift easily, and they don't think about it and self-reflect as we don't as adults. It's when we're aware of it and we self-reflect that we begin to think, wow, I really do need to shift and not get stuck. So it's getting that funnel unclogged and moving and getting unstuck. So for the younger grades, also a different way of getting them to think flexibly is having them take a multi-meaning sentence or task and then diagram it and explain what it is as well. So what strategies help students to think and problem solve flexibly as they complete their schoolwork or their homework? I want to begin with this set of pictures just to get you to think about this. So these are my 2 grandchildren, actually. On the left, the oldest when she was 4 last year, and my youngest when she was 1, and our dog on the right-hand side. And I'd love you all to guess who's the most flexible, do you think? So if anyone wants to put this in the chat, we'll just sort of see what your guesses are.
We have a guess for the baby, for the children.
Okay.
And a guess for the dog.
What's the majority rule? The vote. Sounds like
actually, well, it's split now. So we have 3 votes for baby, 1 for dog, and 1 for both of the children.
Okay. So think about it. And in a way, you're all correct. So the issue is actually that our dog was much more flexible than our grandchildren at this stage. However, as our grandchildren get older, our oldest grandchild is now 5. She's learning strategies. She's at preschool age. Her parents are teaching her strategies, teaching her the importance of flexible thinking, and teaching her jokes and riddles. And most importantly, to be thinking metacognitively about, I need to shift. I can't get stuck. I can't have a temper tantrum about this. I need to calm myself, shift, and use a different approach. And so I use this example to point out that that my grandchildren are going to learn strategies. Strategies can be taught. It's not something that's just ingrained and going to stay the same. And so they're going to far outstrip our dog, and already beginning to do that. So from the earliest grade, for those of you who in the teach at the preschool level, you can certainly begin to teach those strategies. And of course, that goes up right into college and beyond. That where we need to teach our students to shift perspectives, to self-monitor flexibly when they read, they write, they solve math problems, they study, they do their and they take tests. So I'm going to give you some examples for across the grades of ways of teaching flexibility embedded in the curriculum. These are all part of our SMARTS curriculum. For those of you who decide to subscribe and to use this, and of course you can develop your own ways of teaching this. But really, this is what I call the yellow book effect. When we ask kids to highlight what's important, often they highlight everything. They're not differentiating, they're not being flexible, they're not going from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, thinking, what's the big idea? What are the details? How do I coordinate them? So that shift from the top to the bottom of the mountain is not happening. So we need to teach them systematically and basically to say, ignore their irrelevant details. So just using two different colors of highlighters, like the main ideas in yellow, identify the important details in pink, and getting kids to ignore a ton of the information, like only highlight two main ideas. You can't have everything, and only highlight 2 or 3 important details, so that you're forcing kids to shift flexibly between the levels of relevance of the information. Another strategy for teaching kids to write book reports, to summarize, to elaborate the STAR strategy. So those of you who teach first and second grade, when kids initially sort of summarize things, you often ask them who, what, when, where, why, how. Well, we create what we call the STAR strategy because when kids see it in a visual, that they can remember those. They can remember the focus much more easily, where who refers to the characters, what is the conflict and problem, where is this refers to the setting, when refers to the time that something occurred, and why, what's the theme or reason for the conflict. So these core issues that we begin to, those of you who teach first grade begin to teach your students from the earliest grades, really are the core of reading comprehension, written language, right through elementary school. And so when we teach kids that, okay, use a STAR strategy for highlighting and for summarizing the information, it's much easier. Now this can be adapted even for, this is a middle school student who was given on a weekly basis asked to read the local newspaper and to summarize an important article about science that occurred in the local newspaper at that time. And this student used the SMART strategy, the STAR strategy, to first of all do his outline. So his outline was who, what, when, where, why, how, who were the main characters, were Russia and the United States, and the focus, the theme was Mars. They were trying to get to Mars and to figure out the origin of life. So who were the characters, what was their focus, where were they going, why, and so on. And so by creating this star around this complex scientific article, the student could get the main ideas, could flexibly shift and not get bogged down in the details, and could then use this for a 5-paragraph essay about Mars, or to sort of elaborate on the detail as the next step. So we've talked then about just what we call purposeful highlighting, which is one of the strategies in SMART, about a STAR strategy. Let me show you triple note tote, which is a strategy. I love this strategy. It's the It's the one that probably is the most flexible in terms of being able to be used from the early grades right up into college and post-college and graduate school. I've taught this to my graduate students and it's changed their lives. So it's basically having just a 3-column system. The topic or the main ideas in the first column, the details on the second, and this is the most important thing, is the memory strategies in the 3rd column. So you can use this kids can use this for vocabulary, where they'll have the word in the first column, a definition in the second, and an association with a picture that they draw. It can be a cartoon, and they don't have to be good artists. It just can be a stick figure, but something that will help them remember and cement that information in their head. It could be a math formulae, where they had the explanation of the term in the 2nd column and cartoon in the 3rd for remembering. And it can be the main idea. It should be in the 1st column for a story they're reading, for language arts, or for a science, or for history. Sort of what's the main idea in this particular piece of text, and what are the details related to the main idea in the middle column, and most importantly, a drawing or a cartoon or a crazy phrase to remember that information. And students can use a triple note tote for multiple purposes. So for example, at the middle and high school levels, they can definitely use this for outlining information before they write, or for summarizing information, and then for studying, where they turn over one of the first 2 columns, they look at the strategy, and then from that they can quiz themselves in terms of, do I remember what the main idea is, what are the details? So this was an article about owls that the student was reading. So what were the main ideas, eating habits, and the details, and then diagramming a way of remembering that. Their songs, it's another theme about owls. So the details in the middle column, and some cartoons and images in the 3rd to remember. And the 3rd major theme about owls is plants. What do they eat? And what kinds of owls are there? And then the details in the middle column, and some strategies for remembering the information in the 3rd. And similarly in history, these students were learning about apartheid in South Africa. So the word apartheid, what was the definition, and what's the strategy for remembering it? And what is apartheid? Prejudice, treason, concessions, and the student sort of is identifying the key issues in this history text, and then in the definitions or the core information in the middle column, and a strategy for remembering this information in the 3rd. So a triple note tote can be used for complex, from simple to complex information. It can be used across all the content areas. And as I said, it can be used right through from the earliest grades into college and high school, college and graduate school rather. I've had my doctoral students in graduate school who I've assigned triple note totes for taking notes from these very, very complex scientific articles in psychology. And it's helped them to focus on the main ideas, to ignore some of the irrelevant details, and to do incredibly well. I've had brilliant students who've got bogged down in details, and when they've used the triple note tote, it's changed their lives. And similarly in math, math requires an incredible amount of cognitive flexibility. If you think about it, complex division involves 4 operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Students have to think flexibly between all these operations, have to be aware of the fact that they think flexibly, and estimating an answer, for example, in a word problem, and then checking your answer at the end involves cognitive flexibility. So to quote a student, it's like when you're doing math, there's always one more way to solve a problem, meaning there's always a way of being flexible because there's an additional way that you can approach it. To quote other students, cognitive flexibility means to see different points of view and to get different strategies for people. Like, don't just look at it your own way. There are different ways it could be true. So recognizing that you have to step back, and look at it a different way, and that could make a lot of sense for students. So to quote Billy at 16 years, one of our students, with the SMART triple note strategy, I learned to make a hierarchy of notes and have it structure around itself and relate to things. The structure helped me to study and to write long papers. I did not stress out so much about tests anymore. So this link that is in the title of the session today, which is the link between cognitive flexibility and anxiety, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute as the last section of my presentation today. The point that Billy's making is that these strategies, something like triple note, it helped to give him a structure. It helped to make that structure explicit. It helped him to organize. And most importantly, it helped him to ignore irrelevant information and to focus on the major themes. And that reduced his stress. So when he had to study, he wasn't sort of so anxious that he couldn't perform. So I'd like to just show you within the 5 executive function areas that we discussed previously: goal setting, organizing and prioritizing, the shifting, memorizing, and self-monitoring, how cognitive flexibility is a core piece of all of these other executive function processes. I'll just give you an example from each of these areas. So for example, goal setting, we teach can-do goals. I mentioned this and I showed you a number of these and activities last week, a strategy from SMARTS, that we teach kids to set goals that are clear, actionable, numerical, doable, and they consider the obstacles. And last week I talked about, I gave you some examples of students setting goals for doing better in school and ways in which they could set sort of those clear, actionable steps for achieving those goals. That involves cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift back and forth and to say, what are my goals? How am I going to get over these obstacles, and how I'm going to achieve what I want to achieve? Organizing and prioritizing, the next executive function process. We want to teach our students to go from an organization non-system that looks like the one on the left, cluttered papers, to the one on the right, which is sort of very super organized file cabinet that they can sort of easily access. And so as you know, we sent all of this out in PowerPoint. So you have it on your PowerPoint where you can take notes. But I just want you to know that, so I'm just showing you one example of each of these executive function processes and how cognitive flexibility is the underpinning for these processes. That once you teach kids to be flexible, they'll more easily be able to organize and prioritize and to set their goals and to juggle and sort important information. So to stress what's most important, which is what cognitive flexibility is. So organizing time requires them to be flexible. Organizing their materials requires flexibility. Organizing information and organizing ideas all require high levels of cognitive flexibility. So moving from organizing and prioritizing to the next executive function process, which is memorizing. Techniques for teaching memorizing include acronyms, cartoons and associations, funny phrases. And when you teach students these different strategies, they can reduce the information load in order to remember. And in order to create these kinds of memory strategies, once again, they have to be flexible. They have to be able to think outside the box. They have to think of weird or funny things that will jog their memories. And lastly, self-monitoring and self-checking. So many of our students, we ask them to check something, they say, I did, and then you look at the first line and there are 5 errors. So it's what I call, they give it the eyeball effect, which is like, oh yeah, I've skimmed it and I checked it, but they didn't. The issue with checking is they have to recognize and fix the kinds of the mistakes they make. So each student makes different mistakes. So it's getting kids to, we have what we call the top 3 hits. We get kids to go through their work and identify 3 things, 3 types of errors that they typically make, to put those on a note card. So these are my top 3 hits in terms of what kinds of errors I need to recognize and to fix. And then in math, for example, to ask when they complete a math problem, part of that self-monitoring and self-checking is asking at the end of a math problem, does it make sense? So if the problem is, how many people would it take to lift a heavy set of boxes, and some students say 3.5, my question is, okay, is it going to be the legs or the head? You can't have a half a person. So they haven't asked that question of themselves, does it make sense? And that involves, once again, shifting from the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain and back again. And so each of these executive function processes, as I said, is interconnected with cognitive flexibility. So just to give you a sort of one example from SMARTS to give you a sense of how cognitive flexibility also interacts with behavior and emotion. This is an example from our SMARTS elementary curriculum from the lesson called I'm Wearing Your Shoes. When we take someone else's perspectives, we try to see things from their point of view. So the lesson continues. Perspective taking is important when solving problems with friends. Some examples of conflicts are arguing about who sits where at lunch, arguing about who won a contested play in a sports game, getting upset when a friend forgot to do something you asked, or getting frustrated when a friend did not complete their part of a class project. And so we give these scenarios to students, and then we ask them, and you can divide them into groups to talk about these issues, and then have a group discussion, or you can have the individuals describe the conflict here. What was something you may not have understood about your friend's situation? Put yourself in your friend's shoes. And what is something your friend may have understood about your situation? So perspective taking and flexibility. Thought you'd sort of love this illustration. So, and then to help kids as part of cognitive flexibility, ask themselves, what could I have done differently? So think of a time when you were angry or overwhelmed. What could I have done differently? How could shifting flexibly and perspective taking have helped solve the conflict? And then how can we use this knowledge to stop conflicts before they start? So getting kids to think systematically about how flexible they can be and what they should do. So the last question, so that's just an example from our SMARTS curriculum. And for those of you who either use SMARTS already or intend to use SMARTS to subscribe to it, I just wanted to give you a flavor of one of the lessons. So the last question then is, how can cognitive flexibility and executive function strategies help to reduce students' anxiety and stress? Because as we know, stress has been increasing in schools and COVID has exacerbated it significantly. So what happens when kids are stressed is that stress shifts cognition from top-down control processes to bottom-up automatic processes. And stress affects working memory, cognitive flexibility, and cognitive inhibition. Stress also impairs executive control and forces attention towards salient information. So when students are stressed, their executive function systems begin to shut down. They're less flexible. They can't access information as easily. And they can get stuck, very, very stuck. And so by teaching cognitive flexibility and improving students' self-understanding, that can often help them to get out of the situation. So the level of anxiety among students is really, as you know, increased. So suicide is now the second leading cause of death among adolescents aged 15 to 19 years. These statistics from the federal department were collected prior to COVID. So this has gone up, the prevalence of suicides among students. And at that time, suicide accounted for 12% of the mortality in adolescents and young adults, which was incredibly high already. That's gone up significantly. Prior to COVID, 8% of high school students have made a suicide attempt sometime in their lifetime. And that's increased through COVID. And many of these students show academic and behavioral difficulties at school. They show antisocial problems. They show problems with inhibition. They show perfectionism, and they show explosiveness. So if you look at these data, which are pretty shocking, suicide rate rose by 56% in 10 years for 10 to 24-year-olds prior to COVID. And there's been an increase in that. And the contagion effect has increased. And we know that in schools, when one kid commits suicide, there tends to be this awful contagion effect where other kids try to take their lives, and other students in other schools with social media also try to take their lives. So we have to help our students to relieve stress, to think more flexibly, to focus on the positives. And so obviously these are very easy to implement suggestions. Having kids exercise, that's critically important. And if any of you read John Rady's books, the one book is called Spark, and he points out all of the data which shows the impact of exercise on reducing emotional problems significantly, more effective than medication, the effect on attention, on academic performance, on sleep, positive effects and on ADHD. So other strategies that students can use, other approaches to reducing stress: taking a nap, listening to music, meditating, playing with a pet, and most importantly, exercise. And what you also want to try and teach your students is to shift mindsets. So to recognize that mistakes are proof that you're trying hard. And it's okay to not know. It's not okay to not try. That's the example I gave you right at the beginning with famous failures. People like Einstein and Whoopi Goldberg, who looked at their mistakes and said, I know I'm trying, and I'm going to try in a different way. And I'm going to shift my approach and try again. So it's that persistence and the resilience that are developed when students are more flexible and have positive mindsets. So you helping your students to recognize that mistakes are proof that you're trying, and correcting mistakes are proof that you're growing, that it's a good thing to make errors because you can learn from those. And correcting those mistakes is proof that you're improving, you're growing, you're being flexible. So that's really an important message. Carol Dweck, Dr. Carol Dweck, who's in California, has founded the Brainology, has really been the founder of this sort of positive mindset approach, and her work is very, very important. And so helping kids to systematically change their mindsets, as I said, to a positive, to recognize that they have to focus on what I can do, not what I don't or cannot do. And for the younger kids and for older students as well, having them check off some kind of an emotional thermometer, which going from mad, which is in the red zone, to upset, which is in the yellow zone, to calm, which is the blue zone. And having kids who are really having behavioral outbursts use a thermometer like this to monitor and self-regulate and adjust their behavior. So to summarize, as I end off my section of this presentation, I've addressed these questions today. What is cognitive flexibility and why is this a key executive function process? How do we teach strategies that promote flexible thinking and problem solving from the earliest grades? What strategies help students to think and problem solve flexibly as they complete their schoolwork? And how can cognitive flexibility and executive function strategies help to reduce students' anxiety and stress? So I hope that from what I presented to you, that your takeaway will be that it's really important to teach cognitive flexibility every day in your classroom. And you can do it in a variety of ways. You could, beginning with riddles and jokes and multi-meaning words and fairly simple strategies that can make a huge difference for your students. Donna Kincaid in a moment will show you some of these strategies from SMARTS and examples and how we've implemented them in the curriculum. And as always, you don't need to use SMARTS to teach these strategies, but most teachers, the reason we developed SMARTS is teachers approached us and said, I don't have time to develop a curriculum. Can you do it for us? And then we'd rather have you do all sort of the work, which is true. It is very, very time consuming, very expensive, but our curriculum really is very comprehensive. And the teachers who use it, the feedback we've had is they love it because it systematically and explicitly allows you to teach cognitive flexibility and these other executive function processes and to embed these strategies in the curriculum. The idea is not to have a separate study skills class or to view this as an add-on or an additional burden, but rather if you embed these strategies in your teaching, that's going to help your students to become more efficient, more effective, and it's going to reduce your workload because you won't have to be correcting their homework and constantly reminding them about doing certain things in certain ways, because they'll own it. You'll be empowering your students to learn how to learn, something we talked about last week constantly. So to end off, I want to quote Einstein. He said, know where to find the information and how to use it. That's the secret of success. And that's really what executive function is about, and particularly cognitive flexibility. It's being able to think flexibly, to think out of the box, to shift from what's important to what's less relevant and what's irrelevant, and then to know, just because in knowing the information, how to use it, involves an incredible amount of cognitive flexibility in sifting and sorting and prioritizing. So if that's that, hopefully, as you go into teaching tomorrow morning, some of these strategies, this Friday, you could start off with some riddles and jokes, start off with some multi-meaning words. It doesn't matter what the age of your students is, to see if it's an icebreaker, it's humor, and most importantly, it's teaching these cognitive flexibility. So I'm going to hand over to Donna, who will take you through some of our strategies, our SMART strategies systematically, and then we'll have we'll have time at the end for questions and answers from you. So thank you, Donna.
Okay, thanks, Lynn.
So I'll give you the screen.
Okay. And I think it's still your screen.
No, because I've stopped taking the share. I don't have it anymore. Caitlin, do you have any suggestions for Donna?
Donna, are you seeing does the bottom of your screen look like it usually does? Do you see the green share screen button?
I have it now.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, here we are. Let me put some more light on. It's gotten dark in here all of a sudden. All right, hi everyone, and I love talking about cognitive flexibility. I love doing these with Lynn because I feel like I'm using the word all the time now, and it really, whether it's working, I have a couple of young, grandsons who, sometimes just get stuck. They get stuck in what they're doing and they start getting upset. And again, when you're thinking about working with young kids, they're 4 and 8. But in terms of when things don't go their way, right? It's stopping and thinking and trying to shift. So you've been listening for a while now. So I just want you to know we're shifting, we're transitioning to another part of this presentation. So I want you to wiggle. If you have to stand up, sit back down, don't go too far, but just kind of shake your body out a little as we go through this last section with some practical strategies that you guys can use, okay? Just see which arrow I'm going to use. Okay, I like this slide just because it's talking about adaptability and adaptability to life. And adaptability to life is being really flexible with our circumstances. And every day, life can throw us a curveball. And there's a lot of research. There's a lot of, when I was looking a couple of months ago, I saw all these things about these courses now for adults on learning how to be more adaptable in the workplace and at home. But it really is the secret to lifelong learning. And I think Lynn was making that point, because when you talk about cognitive flexibility or using these strategies, it's really not just for school. It's really for life, for, us as adults, as well as it is for our students. So I want to present a few of the strategies from our program, and you have the handouts that go along with this so that you can actually use these in your classroom after. So purposeful highlighting, Lynn has mentioned this, and we don't want the yellow highlighter syndrome. So really teaching kids about why you highlight, what kinds of things, you might highlight. And when I'm talking about highlighting here, it's not necessarily just taking a yellow highlighter and using it. Highlighting can be underlining, highlighting can be circling or boxing, but making something, stand out. So ways to highlight with the purpose, why we want to do it, to see different perspectives. Even when Lynn was talking about that, wearing someone else's shoes, you're seeing some other person's perspective. And this is important in life, for our emotional regulation in school, but also, when students are reading novels and you want them to take on or talk about the character's perspective, or even in history, being able to take on a character or a real person in history and role play or something. You're taking on someone's perspective. Distinguishing main ideas and details, say with different colors highlighting. What about when they're reading, just identifying unfamiliar vocabulary and having them notice that it's unfamiliar too. I don't really know what this means. And then drawing our attention to important information. And it could be following directions, this in math, the signs of an integer, just positive, negative numbers. So we're going to be looking at some ways to highlight across the grades. I like this cartoon. It just says, I wonder if my teacher gets tired of saying wow, wow, wow all day. Because what do students do sometimes when we ask them to follow directions? Sometimes they just go ahead and I know what she wants me to do. But I wonder if you really think about it from not just in elementary school, because we have a following directions lesson in our elementary program. But I don't know about you, but I work with high school students, college students, and they don't follow directions very well either. Or they assume they know what the teacher has asked them to do. And they often miss something, especially if they may have ADHD, or they're just not paying attention to something because, again, they assume they know what the teacher has asked of them. So in the elementary program, we focus on following directions, highlighting to understand and follow directions, as well as this shifting between multiple perspectives when reading text. And we have a similar one in our secondary program. So I want you to read and follow the directions on this worksheet to complete it, okay? You have it in your packet, but I want you to just read through all the directions before you begin. So take a couple of minutes to read through them and see where you're going to go. We'll just see. Okay, so if you've read down there, I don't know if there's anyone in this group that may have actually started trying to complete this worksheet. If you have, say so in the chat, be honest. If we give this, or you've given something like this to students, they often may, again, the wow, 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 I know, I'm not going to read through them all. I'm just going to start right at the top and put my name and date on the paper, and again, start doing the work. But if you got down to number 10, it says complete only steps 1 and 2. And how often our students kind of just, miss something within the directions. So, talking about these instances too, even sharing stories about times that we may have not followed directions carefully and then what happened, and then have them share, stories in a similar fashion. Sometimes I'll share that I don't usually follow recipes so much, I just kind of throw things together, whatever. But when you're baking, especially, you do need to follow directions. But sometimes I'll think I know which ingredients are going to be mixed together, and I don't read carefully. And the finished product doesn't always turn out as I would like. This has happened with banana bread before. Even I was making it apple pie, with my 4-year-old grandson last night, and there was a little I did notice after that I didn't sift 2 things together that were supposed to be before we mixed them with the apples. So I don't think it's going to affect the apple pie at all, but things like this happen. And so sharing, so that we want students to know the importance of why you would do certain strategies. So the strategy we have here for following directions is 3 steps. Just circle the action verbs that are telling you what you need to do. Learn a little grammar there as well. Underlining the important information that you need to complete the task, and then number the steps you need to complete the task. So here's an example. This is a reading response. These are the directions, describing a main character, etc., and providing examples. So this is how we would use this strategy. Number 1 was circling the action verbs. Okay, so describe, provide, and explain. Number 2 would be underlining important information that you need. So describe the main character, use 3 adjectives, provide 2 examples, and then explain why or why not. And again, there's a lot in this direction. But the 3rd step is number the steps. So we look at 1, 2, 3, and the numbers actually go along with each verb, telling you what you have to do. So sometimes I think I've learned this too, that sometimes when we look back at the text that we give students, sometimes we give them too much to go through for a direction. And again, students who may have a learning disability, or students whose attention is weak, want to get to the meat of it, and let me just get it done. And they may not focus on the important part. So this is a way of breaking that down. And speaking of recipes, here's another example. Again, circle the action words, and then underline important information about the water, the pasta, how long, serve immediately with your sauce, and then number the steps. So bring, add, boil, drain, serve. 6 steps to this one. Again, you don't have to, you can use this with older students as well, but think about what directions you would have them, break it down. We do, and always we want to know how this can be, is it helpful and how can it be applied when reading directions. With older kids, we do add another step too, which is creating a checklist. So after they've done those 3, so what if they had to write a paragraph? We've used this before about time in quarantine. We're not quarantining so much anymore, but brainstorming ideas, etc. And they can do the same thing, but when they're finished, if they take all those verbs this is what they would come out with. The simple list, though it's a long one, of what they have to do to complete that paragraph. Again, following directions is something that we may not assume that, or we assume that kids are able to do at different grade levels. But, you know, sometimes we see in class that they still need some kind of focus on this, especially when it comes to test taking, and whether it's in-class tests or standardized tests. So it's always good in terms of using strategies when they're practicing. As Lynn has talked in the first session about, you know, metacognition and reflection and how important it is, you know, I want to continue to emphasize that here, that with teaching any strategy, you want to get feedback from the student, you know, about whether they liked it or didn't like it, how they could apply it to something else. And also not just, yes, I liked it, but how do you know it was helpful to you? You know, do they see any improvement in what they're doing, in their performance? And again, their reflections change and grow over time. All right, this is one of my favorite activities, and you have a page that's called The House. And so we're going to be looking at this. But first, if and you can use the chat for this, you know, when you think about a house, okay, what kind of features do you generally think about? Whatever kind of house you have, like, what are you really looking at? Maybe just put in chat some things. I like, you know, to look at kitchens. But what do you like to look at in a house? What are your preferences? Is it inside? Is it outside? What are some of those details? Number of, you know, the garages, how many garages are there?
Yeah, we have some great responses. We have yard, kitchen, closets, decorating ideas, kitchen, backyard, porch, space.
Mm-hmm. Great. Even how many bathrooms? I don't know about you, but you know, sometimes I get tired of sharing. Oh, what just happened? Sharing my bathroom. All right, so we're going to be looking. I'm going to pause this for just a second. I'm going to take you on a little dream tour here, and I want you to be, and you can again keep putting things in the chat. I want you to be thinking about this house. It's a multi-million-dollar, you know, house. But just features of it that stand out to you, things that you really like, and thinking about what you might look for. It might not be the house that you would want, but just what features you really see in this, okay? Not watching all of it. Just
here we are in La Playa, one of the most desirable neighborhoods in all of Point Loma. Now we are nearby some of the best beaches Southern California has to offer, as well as great yacht clubs, fishing, and all of the fun water sport activities you think of when you're California dreaming. Now today we're taking a look inside this multi-level smart home with multi-million-dollar views of not only Coronado Island, but downtown San Diego as well, with its own private movie theater and over 3,000 square feet of outdoor living space. Let's go take a look inside. Good to see you. Good to see you, Ty. Everybody, this is Chase Maher from the Chase Maher Group. Tell us about this place.
We have a contemporary 4-bedroom, 7-bath smart home with over 5,000 square feet of living space, 3,000 square feet of outdoor space. First, I want to show you the Savant smart home system. We have 6 security cameras outside. You can see it from every iPad along in the house. You can see it from your phone when you're away. An entertainer-style kitchen. We have handleless cabinets, Italian Carrera marble backsplash, porcelain waterfall counters, and one of the really cool features of this kitchen is this 1.5-inch infused glass breakfast table, looking over the yacht club, looking over Coronado Bay, and of course the skyline at night.
You liking anything so
These are
far?
folding
Put
glass
some
doors.
things in the
They
chat.
fold open very easily. They save space. They offer incredible view and incredible airflow.
Wow, you talk about an entertainer's dream home. This is the epitome of an entertainer's dream.
This pool table is custom designed by the Superior Institute of Design in France. It's a beautiful pool table, beautiful space in here. You can catch a movie.
I think it's time for me to take you up on the game of pool. Very nice. And just like that, the game is over. We could have faked it, but no staging on this show. All of it's real.
Let's go check out the movie theater.
Let's do it.
So you can do anything you want in here. You can catch a game, you can play video games, beautiful furniture. You can lay down, you can hang out. You don't got to go anywhere. Next, we're going to show the office.
Bam, and as you walk in, I mean, you got to stop and pause because you have that view again. It feels presidential with these types of views.
I got a little surprise for you. So just wait right here and give me 1 second. So Ty, what better way to enjoy the view, enjoy the breeze, enjoy the lighting than have your own personal gym?
This is
All right, I'm going to stop the dreaming for a little bit. I know we have some information in the chat. I love that last part, though. I mean, this goes on for another number of minutes, but imagine being able to exercise looking at that view. That's kind of nice. The movie theater, functional space, the openness. Yeah, there's a lot of things. I don't know who would really want to live in a space like that. You might. I prefer a comfier home, but so anyway.
motivating. You know, I could wake up whether I'm in a suit or not.
Nope, I don't want you. We want to go. All right, so I want you to think about that. But this passage that you're going to read is called The House. And again, we're looking at changing perspective, shifting back and forth from one perspective to another. And we're going to be starting with looking at this passage as a real estate agent, okay? And I'm going to go through part of it with you, and then I'm going to have you do a part on your own. So just move this. All right, so let's just kind of get a feel for it. But on this, if you use this with students, okay, and with the video, you can use any kind of video about any kind of house, but it's really to get the kids starting to think about what features in a house. And maybe some of them have had recent experience moving and they were looking at different houses or hearing their parents talk about houses. So it doesn't matter what video you show, but something to kind of spark that metacognitive activator that Lynn talked about last week. And here, because we're going to be looking at two different perspectives, you would mark it, the first one would be for a real estate agent, okay? So just listen, and I want you to, again, think about some of these things. If you're a real estate agent, what would you want to feature maybe in an ad or something about this home, okay? So the two boys ran until they came to the driveway. Oh, actually, I don't know if this was that the beginning of it? Oh, sorry. See, I told you today was good for skipping school, said Mark. My mom is never home on Thursdays, he added. Tall hedges hid the house. So if you're seeing things that would be good for marketing this house, put it in the chat. Tall hedges hid the house from the road, so the pair strolled across the finely landscaped yard enclosed by a stone wall. I never knew that your place was so big, exclaimed Pete. Yeah, but it's nicer now than it used to be since my dad built the Olympic-size infinity pool and added the indoor basketball court. So what are some of the things that you've listed so far? Let's see, for this one.
Privacy and tall hedges.
Okay, yeah.
The landscaped yard, that Olympic-sized pool. Entertainment options, basketball court, indoor activities.
Yes, and I think someone said they grew up in San Diego on the coastal areas. Okay, great. Brings back some memories. All right, so think about this now. There were front and back doors as well as a side door that led to the 5-car garage, which was filled with cars, including a Ferrari and a Cadillac Escalade with chrome rims, 3 mountain bikes and 2 jet skis. As they entered the side door, Mark explained that this door was always open in case his younger sisters got home earlier than their mom. Anything else you would say that would be great for a real estate agent to be talking about or featuring?
Someone mentioned the 5-car garage and lots of room for toys.
Yes. Now, some kids might say the Ferrari, you know, or the Cadillac, but those don't usually come with the house. So you could be talking about that, what, you know, what is from in the house and what's not, unless you buy as is with cars included. So you see how this goes. So you'd be doing this with one color highlighter. Maybe it's yellow for this one, just from the real estate perspective. And then from a private eye perspective. So why would this house, if you're looking at it, why would this house, how could this house be maybe a target for a robbery? So you're changing your perspective, you're thinking about it in a different way. And, you know, with younger kids, when I talk about cognitive flexibility or shifting, sometimes I tell them to put on like magic glasses. They could be imaginary glasses, or if you get the Harry Potter glasses, we're going to take a different look at this. We're going to review. It's good for checking as well. But let's look at this from a different perspective. If you were doing this too, for some kids, having them put on like a hat, even if it's a pretend, PI hat that they put on to look at this. So again, we're going to look at this last paragraph. And what might you be, well, actually, let's go back to this one first. The same one that we read, okay? What might be some of the features that a private eye might be looking at and not the real estate person?
Someone said there's so many doors, and there's particularly an unlocked door, a lot of places to hide, and no one's home on Thursdays.
Yeah.
And with the tall hedges, can't easily see the house from the road. There are multiple entrances. Very rich people, lots of expensive items.
Yes. Okay, great. You guys got this. And there can be some things that are on both sides, like the hedges for privacy, but they also can hide things. There's another line that talks about a hole in the roof. I think it's in the last paragraph. Well, that can be, something for the real estate agent to note that has to get fixed, and then not so good for the PI. All right, so let's look at this last paragraph. And is there anything else in here that, and again, you would have the kids, even on that sheet, you would have a different highlighter and put in private eye, a different color, and then going through this, okay? But 8 bedrooms, that'd be good for the real estate person. But look through this and see other things for the private eye. If this was going to be a target for a robbery, what are a few other things that might stand out? Safety deposit box, maybe.
The furs and the jewelry, the Xbox, and the escape route.
Yes. Okay, great. So what I'm going to illustrate here is that, how the highlighting would look if we had these 2 colors going on. Okay. And first, it's going to be from the real estate agent's perspective. Okay. All these things, even again, the hole in the roof because it needs to be fixed. And then if you take the other perspective of the private eye, those would be ones that would be pointed out. The neat thing is, though, once you have this, look what you can do. You can pull those things out and put them in outline form, okay? And think about the things that your students can do with this. They could write a paragraph about this. What's the difference in perspectives in looking at this same passage? And again, you're teaching them how to pull out some main ideas and details, looking at one particular thing, but you're also teaching them how they then can take that information and then have it in an outline that they may be able to also use for some writing later on. So there are multiple uses of that. And again, there's a lot of shifting that goes on. And as any of this is shared, when kids share the information, or again, if we were in a live group and you're sharing this, you're learning more about it. And so if kids were having trouble with shifting and seeing the difference, they're learning from each other. And again, just talking about how did this help you, marking them up, how did it help you with understanding different perspectives, and how do you see yourself using these in the future? And then, with smarts, we always, again, start with the metacognitive activator. And again, that kind of gets kids going. And oftentimes it may have nothing to do with the actual lesson. We may start with something that's really non-academic and then getting into something that's, more academic, maybe with a reading that they're actually doing for class. And we have all kinds of strategy reflection sheets. Okay, again, I'm going to shift to our last area of strategies for today. And this is shifting perspectives in writing. And particularly in considering the purpose of the writing, the audience, and the writer, okay? And if we look at this particular essay that was done, okay, I want you to think about who may have written it, okay? What was the purpose? And again, who's the audience? So even if I pull out some just pieces of it, come on, go back. Hold on. Pieces of it, you can really get at those three things, okay? So school lunchtime should be extended in order to promote healthy habits and to increase social bonds with peers. In an effort to increase learning time, schools have drastically cut lunch times. This brief period barely gives students enough time to eat and digest food, okay? You get that, you're getting the point of this. Mealtime should also be used as a time for students to connect with friends and unwind from their stressful days. And then the last sentence, increasing lunch times would not only allow this critical time, but would encourage healthy habits as well. So it's in the best interest of all students and should be seriously considered. So who is the writer? Who is the writer in this passage? Is it a teacher? Is it a student? I think people would probably say it's a student. And why? Why are they writing this? Why do you think they're writing this? What do they hope to get from this? Any responses, Caitlin?
Well, we have one response that it might be an editorial from a newspaper written by a parent.
It could be from a parent. Most of the time we think it's from a student, maybe, but it definitely could be from a parent. And we know that some parents really think that the kids don't have any time, to eat and do that, okay? And then so we could have different audiences, because if a student wrote it, the audience might be an administrator at school, it might be the principal, the assistant principal, something like that. If a parent is writing it, it may be for a larger audience. It could be for the principal, but it could be more for the community, as well, okay? But all these are discussion points, because it's not so much having the right answer. When you do an exercise like this with kids, it's being able to talk about it and talk it through and see what reasoning kids, excuse me, have. So in what ways do you have to shift when writing? Again, it could be the audience, teachers versus peer. Think about when they're in English, what if you want them to shift some writing from something that's happy to make it sad, or some other kind of tone, or again, main idea versus details. Excuse me. So we're going to look at this one, and again, the shifting that goes on here, and thinking about the diagnostic lizard. Now you have a copy of this, and Lynn has mentioned the diagnostic lizard. I want you to take a look at it and kind of scan through it and tell me some positive things you would say about this writing. And again, put them in the chat for Caitlin to see. What are some positive things that you would say about this writing? Anyone, even without reading the whole thing?
There are a lot of details.
Okay, great details. I know this is after school.
And we have a lot of responses for details, and that the story is in order and it's easy to read.
Okay, easy to read. Has punctuation. Complete sentences. Okay, so things like that. Now, none of you asked, and we don't know kind of the age or the grade level of who wrote this. So if I said that and these are some things that other groups have often said about this, you know, and that you mentioned as well. On the negative part, very short sentences, right? Sentence fragments, ambiguous pronouns, very listy. But if it was a second grader writing it, it would be different, right? If I said this was written by a sixth grader or a seventh grader. Why? Because we would have different expectations for those grade levels, right? Or what if a ninth grader wrote this? So if you pose something to, you know, to your students, use this or something else, again, start with this but have them talk about it in terms of, again, the structure here, you know, it has nouns and verbs, but what would be appropriate for, you know, a second grader, third grader. I know some high school kids have had to write books for even about a history subject, right? For younger kids. And they would have to review children's books to see the sentence structure, the sentence length, and things like that, and be able to, you know, shift and write it in a very different way in a language that, say, a third or fourth grader, you know, could read. So this is a great exercise to do, you know, with your students, but even having them figure out and make new ones. So if this was a second grade, okay, what about if it was a sixth grade? What would be the positive and negatives, you know, for that? You're also kind of testing some of their grammar skills and editing skills, you know, as well. So we're going to try out this, our last activity, watching the time. So if you think about this as the writer, the purpose, and the audience, and if you're in your classroom too, you can make circles that you give out in different colors for these three things and have teams work together and give them a particular role for the activity. And have them produce things, and they can be funny things, they can be serious things. We're going to try to do a more funny thing right now, and you have this list as well in your packet. And so I love using this one, and I have two that are kind of highlighted here in different colors. So I want you to think about, and I'll show you an example in a minute. But if you were a third grade student, okay, and you were writing a love letter to the lizard in that diagnostic lizard paragraph, okay, and it was for the public. So it might be for a local newspaper or, you know, something that the public would read. What might that be? And you can have some, you know, really crazy time, you know, coming up with that. The other one might be a senior citizen writing to the environmental police complaining about the lizard and cat. And again, you can mix these up. You can put other things that the kids would be able to do. For, you know, younger kids, you're not going to put maybe academics and other scholars, but you can definitely use this, you know, for older kids that way, and, you know, and have them do it. And they could even be writing to their, you know, to their grandmother. So this is one that a teacher wrote for one of our presentations, and this is a very concerned citizen. So this is the senior citizen, Martha, and she lives at the retirement home near downtown. I am very concerned about our lizard population. It is being endangered by all the stray cats in our neighborhood. How are you going to, how are you supposed to be going to address the growing stray cat population in our town? Okay, here's a love letter one. My heart breaks knowing that the cat has chased you right under those stairs. Please know that I hope you will become a beautiful pink. I don't even know what happened to you. Beautiful something when our eyes meet, because you are my love, my favorite lizard. I have to go back and correct those. So Anyway, what I would like you to do, okay, is maybe take a couple minutes. Some of you are really creative with this. It doesn't have to be a big deal, but see if you can write a 1 or 2 liner to end with today. That could be one of the ones that I've highlighted, or it could be any other combination, just a first or second line. Just have some fun as we're kind of ending and preparing for some question and answers in a couple of minutes. So we'll keep a look at the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes. Challenge you. I hope someone's going to take a chance and show some flexibility here. I wish I could see all your faces, because I'd be looking at definitely some different tables to encourage you more, but I can't see you. I don't know if behind the screen, Deanna, you could see if they put up a hand or something in the to show that they were thinking of one.
I am not seeing anything at this time.
Okay, I'm going to show another type of example using this a similar thing, but please, if you have one, if you have an idea, please put it in. And then we'll see what kinds of questions you have. Okay, so this was actually a excerpt from 3rd grade ELA MCAS in Massachusetts. And so we took this to look at if the kids were going to look at a writer, inventor, and statesman. I think the question had to do with that. How was Benjamin Franklin a writer, inventor, and a statesman? So going down, they used different colors to go along with each of those three positions, you know, for him. So see how that kids learn how to pick out main points, but not in a more guided, strategic way, rather than just everything being important. The question had to do with those 3 things. So they looked for those in a very strategic way. And you can take other things that are from some of your standardized tests, old ones. This was from 2017, or from history books or other material, and do the same thing, is have the students kind of look at 2 or maybe 3 different areas within that particular reading. And, you know, again, looking at the discussion part about what changed, even like with the diagnostic lizard, what might have changed between the first and the second one, you know, how you rewrote it, why you rewrote it, etc. And even having kids think, you know, when a teacher reads your writing, you know, how does he or she have to shift? Have it all come back to them too, and have them think about a different way. I know Michael Greschler, the director of SMARTS, he always, I think, talks about how he, you know, sometimes asks students, I think it was him that said this, is that, you know, how long do you think your teachers, you know, prepare for each class that you have? Oh, now 10 minutes or whatever. They don't do a lot of prep. Now we know that all of you put in so much more time than that. But again, we want them to change their thinking about things. So we have to, you know, help educate them about kind of the truth in that and what it really takes. But I think as kids, even really young ones, understand cognitive flexibility, and you use the terms, and young kids really like these big terms and know what it means, and use words even like we're shifting now, we're transitioning, you know, to another activity. You have 5 minutes to transition or shift, or let's stand up, let's do something else to help our brains switch to something else. And you'll hear them using that language after that. And, maybe have looking for opportunities to say, oh, I think we had to shift there, or Miss So-and-so, I think it's time to shift. And we want them to be able to do that. And again, for academics as well as behavioral reasons. So, okay, I think we are going to go for questions. These were the 3 things I tried to focus on is, again, how to teach students to explicitly how to read and follow directions, how to use purposeful highlighting to identify multiple perspectives, and then teach students how to shift their perspective in writing by having them consider the writer, the purpose, and the audience. I thank you all for your attention. And if you have any questions, please contact me or, contact us through our website. We'd love to answer questions. Okay, so we have some time. I don't know if questions have been gathered during the presentation or not, or people just want to ask them now.
And they can be for both parts of our presentation, for both mine and Donna's. We hope you have some good questions. We're excited to see what they are.
We do have a couple questions, and I know that attendees can raise hands and also put your questions in the chat now. But I do have a question here. This goes back to from before cognitive flexibility and goal setting. What tips do you have for students who get really stuck when a goal doesn't go according to plan, like when a goal becomes challenging?
Good question. And Donna, you can elaborate, because I talked about can-do goals last week. And actually sort of, if you're using the can-do strategy, which we teach in SMARTS, that's specifically designed to get kids to get unstuck. So as we talked about last week, if they go through that process of figuring out what are my goals? Are these goals realistic for me? Can I meet them? How am I going to reach these goals? And then are they doable? And what are the obstacles? So when they get to that point of, are these goals doable? Like the example I gave you was a student who said he wants to get, a B+ in math when he'd been failing. So the issue was he had to start saying he has to structure his time. So I'm going to study for every day. I'm going to do my math homework for an hour every single day. I'm going to Monday through Friday, and on the weekend, I'm going to do all my homework. I'm going to sort of look through, do some additional extra credit work, etc. And then what are the obstacles? Well, I have hockey every single day, and I spend an hour on the phone with my friends. So taking those obstacles, listing them out, and then identifying ways in which he's going to overcome those obstacles. Like, well, I probably should stay in school for longer so that I have some structure and I can get, some support to get my work done, and I will not take any calls from friends until my math homework's done, and but most importantly, also building in time for his sports as well. Donna, do you want to add anything?
I think the only thing I would add is that with going through that process, and again, the identifying obstacles and ways to overcome them is really important. It has kids think in advance before it actually happens. But sometimes goals aren't reached, and it's going back and reviewing that whole can-do process and seeing, was it the goal? Or the goal may be fine, but it may be the steps, or maybe there are other obstacles that they encountered, and then it's kind of going back and reviewing it. So, but going through the process, sometimes it does help change kids' thinking about what's appropriate for them or not, because students may come to me, even high school students, in the college process, and they may say that, they want to apply to Harvard. And I may be thinking in my head, that may not be the best school for this student to apply to, but I'm not going to tell them, no, don't apply. But it's like going through the process of what do you need to find out, and setting goals around that, maybe identifying other schools and the criteria and kind of looking at a lot of things. And then, what could get in his way or her way, and spelling it all out, but going back and then reviewing it again. Is it the goal or is it the steps? Because if they're not doing the steps, then that would lead to failure.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Another question came in earlier. Someone said, I'm curious if there's a correlation between aging and the diminishing of executive function. So there's just a question about that.
That's a great question.
We know definitely for working memory.
Let's through to much older ages. The interesting thing is that there is a developmental change in these processes. For example, students around the age of 12 or 13, they can think more logically. Piaget used to talk about this, the stage of logical operations. And at that point, the executive function strategies processes improve. So from age 13 through to the mid-20s, those executive function processes certainly can be honed and improved sort of over time as well through strategy use. That's the point I make. And sort of consistently over time with strategy use. They don't really start declining until, as Donna said, working memory until much older, in the 60s, in our 60s. And if as adults, we use these strategies, we access them, we think, and we're active in using these strategies, and we understand what our own learning profiles are and our challenges and strengths, then we can improve our executive function process. They do not, they're not going to deteriorate. And working memory as well, strategies are going to help improve that process and hopefully reduce that that sort of less accurate memory, at a later age.
On the other side of that, in case you don't know, I can't remember if you mentioned this the last session, Lynn, but in terms of the developmental stages of executive function, it is the latter, the part of the brain that develops later on, and often is not fully developed until we're in our, even early to mid 20s. And research has shown that if you do have ADHD or a learning disability, you could be 2 or 3 years lagging, with that. And we do see that a lot in boys, more so than, well, my experience working with, college kids, that it's often more in boys than girls that I see this. But so there's hope, like if you're a parent of a student who's really struggling, and as we try to give parents hope that, people can improve their executive function, and if they're committed to learning strategies and and using them and finding what works for them.
Great, thank you. And there's another question. So I think you both touched briefly on teachers modeling cognitive flexibility for students, and there's a question if you have more suggestions for ways that teachers can do that, ways that they can explicitly model cognitive flexibility in their own routine for their students.
Do you want to start with this, Donna? Yeah,
I think talking through situations, and I think of this in early grades, especially how we talk to younger kids, where we're always talking things through. And more explicit about what we're doing and why we're doing it, which is building the metacognitive piece, but also in terms of when things don't go right for us, sharing it. When we have to shift, when the fire alarm goes off, what do we have to do? We have to shift now, or telling them about an experience, that we've had, and where things didn't go as planned. And they can come up with experiences too, like on a a family trip. Well, kind of what went wrong, right? And how did you have to shift? Did you have to, make alternate plans? And so just even through stories, okay, stories and the conflicts or things that happen in stories and talking about them, how do these, these characters have to change their way of thinking? What did they have to do? So it's kind of making it come alive and bringing it, to reality every day. Something may happen. You forgot your lunch. Okay, we have to think about this. We have to come up with an alternative solution for lunch.
Thank you. So Dina, I'm not sure if you're seeing any other questions. Those are the ones that I have on my list.
Those are what I have seen as well at this point. I just want to point out, I am really grateful for your time and your expertise today. You have really made me think outside the box as well.